Welcome to Worldbuilding Films, where we analyze the world settings and rules of films and TV shows to see if they work, if they don't, and if not, how they could be improved to enhance their stories. Today, we're going to be discussing the latest highly successful animated film from the mouse itself, Encanto. And right off the bat, let me say that I really enjoyed this, but in a perplexing way, it ended up giving me the reverse effect of Onward, the review of which you can find over here. In the Pixar film, the story started out pretty okay, but ended up in an amazing and profound way, whereas here, the story started out great, but I have to admit, it kinda lost its momentum towards the end. Which is a shame considering that there was so much potential here and it would have made this an even bigger classic than what most are claiming it to be. What are these problems exactly? Well, let's not waste any more time and jump right into it to see what aspects of the world building could have been fixed, all while trying to keep in my head all these numerous family members. Of course, there will be spoilers ahead. The plot. So Encanto tells the story about a magical family called the Madrigals. They're the most important members of a small hidden village in the mountains of Colombia. The head honcho of them is Abuela Alma, and the story goes that decades ago, when she was much younger, she and her husband Pedro were escaping their hometown after some people started attacking and burning down their houses. As they made their getaway, Abuelo Pedro was killed trying to fend off these attackers, and the resulting death caused, well, quite literally a miracle to happen. Dare I say an Encanto. More specifically, a candle of theirs became an enchanted one that could never go out, and it not only drove the attackers away, but created this safe hidden area for the entire village to seek refuge in. In fact, so long as this candle remained intact, it even created a special house, called casita, that could move and animate for them, and bestowed each of the family members with a special power or gift. Furthermore, special rooms were given to each family member, specifically tailored for their gifts. The family consists of Abuela Alma's daughters Julieta, who can heal with the food she cooks, Pepa, who controls the weather with her mood, and Bruno, no, not yet, who can see into the future. And then there are their own children, Isabella, who can grow flowers and plants, Luisa, who's super strong, Dolores, who can hear anything even from far away, Camilo, who can shapeshift into other people, and Antonio, who later will have the gift of speaking to animals. The main character in all of this, however, is Mirabel, and she is the one who, for some strange reason, hasn't actually received any gift whatsoever. So, she lives her life praising the other family members and looking for Abuela's approval, while feeling like she has little worth. After the ceremony where Antonio got his gift, proving that the magic didn't stop with just Mirabel, she begins to notice that cracks are forming in their casita. Cracks that disappear whenever anyone else is around, and that, despite denying it in front of everyone, even Abuela seems to be secretly aware of, because it turns out that the magic is slowly fading for some reason. Confused, Mirabel begins to ask some of her sisters for questions. Luisa reveals that her strength has been disappearing lately and tells Mirabel to ask about their tío Bruno. Tia Pepita mentions Bruno. Not yet. Saying that his visions always cause terrible things to happen, and one day he just ran away for some unknown reason. Curious, Mirabel visits Bruno's tower and finds there were shattered pieces of a vision he had and no one knew about. And that vision is about how Mirabel herself will be the cause of Casita officially breaking and the magic disappearing. In a desperate attempt, she looks for Bruno in search for answers, but turns out Bruno was actually hiding in the walls of Casita this whole time. He knew that Mirabel would have been blamed and outcast if people knew of his vision, so he purposely hid away in order to protect her from such a fate. But what can they do to fix this mess? Well, asking for one final vision, it turns out that the destined breaking of Casita is actually in flux, and it all hinges on whether Mirabel can patch things up with her sister Isabella, whom she hates. Eventually, Mirabel succeeds, finding out in the process that Isabella was actually under pressure from having to be the perfect daughter for the family all this time. In fact, through the course of the whole film, we find out that many family members were under too much pressure to be their best. Abuela Alma then comes in and sees what's been going on, argues with Mirabel, saying that she's caused nothing but trouble for the whole family, and this time Mirabel is the one who talks back, saying that the true reason for the magic fading was Abuela putting too much pressure for perfection on everyone. The fight is so deep that Casita crumbles completely, with the candles snuffed out and the magic, along with everyone's gift, is officially gone. It's a dark moment for the family. Abuela finds that Mirabel was near a stream, crying and feeling guilty for having caused so much trouble. But Abuela instead comforts her, admitting that she did put too much pressure on everyone after all. The reason was because, when her Pedro died, it was as if she had lost everything, and she felt like the miracle was all that she had left of him. She put so much effort into preserving it that she forgot to take care of the well-being of her family first. The two patch up, even Bruno is forgiven, and the entire family and community decide to gather together to fix up the broken house of the Madrigals, despite the family not having any more powers. And just as they finished everything and bonded together once again, Mirabel is given a doorknob to officialize the new home, and suddenly, the magic returns entirely from Casita to their powers, and everyone celebrates together, with Mirabel finally being accepted in full. Okay, so as far as animated Disney musicals go, I gotta say this was actually quite a thematic, bold move to make. And it's a trend that I've seen Disney tackle more and more lately, going from simple plots with obvious bad guys to much more complex plots and a desire to address more adult themes that, dare I say, kind of reflect a modern-day interest to unpack and deconstruct family histories and all the baggage they entail more than ever. And frankly, I think that that's absolutely great. I know people really miss the good old classic Disney villains, and I can understand, but I personally find these new types of stories to be quite fascinating, honestly. And as most of you might agree, kind of cathartic. But there's just one little problem. While the intentions are great, the problems fall specifically with the ending, which, even if this is a Disney film and has certain check marks to follow, could have made this much more powerful. And yeah, a good chunk of these theories you'll already have heard of by now because everyone and their abuela has talked about them to death. The embroidery on their clothes represent their powers. Mirabel's miracle is being the future head of the household. Casita is actually Pedro's spirit. Freaking Bruno is the father of Alberto in an entirely different movie, etc. Most of these I won't mention because, fun as they aren't relevant to today's discussion. And I want to do my best to at least try and add something else that others might not have mentioned yet. Good luck on that, I know, but I want to at least try. So let's unpack this family that certainly needs therapy with Abuelo Pedro. All of the events of the film take place due to a sacrifice that happened 50 years prior to our main plot, all sparked from the love between Abuela Alma and Abuelo Pedro. They ran away from their homes when these people started attacking their village, and Pedro's sacrifice to stall these people caused the miracle to happen in the first place. The film itself doesn't explicitly say anything about who these mysterious people are. However, there are some explanations that can be found from behind the scenes. We know that the whole story is set in Colombia. It's one of their main marketing points after all, but it turns out it's also set in a specific time in Colombia, and that is towards the end of the 1800s. To understand this better, we need some real-life historical context. See, in those years, Colombia was going through what was called the 1,000-Day War. It was a civil war that lasted, 1,000 days, and the short story was that it was caused by a growing rivalry between political parties from both liberal and conservative sides. Not familiar at all. It had nothing to do with outside invasions or anything like that, but it was a period in which the people of Colombia itself began to revolt against their own kind, often in violent ways in the name of politics. So, when the villagers are attacked, it's not from some invading country, but from other Colombians. Maybe even people they once knew and were friends with, even from their own towns. With all of this in mind, let's analyze what is one of the biggest theories going around about the film. People are speculating on the possibility that the candle, Casita, and, the entire Encanto of the film are actually the spirit of Pedro after his sacrifice. And that, honestly, is a really good explanation. Among all the theories floating around, it's the one that makes the most sense. So, for our purposes here today, we're going to run with that. The miracle is actually Abuelo Pedro. But not exactly as you'd think. Colombia is a country that is mostly Catholic and Christian, and they have a tradition on December the 8th where they celebrate Saint Mary. And as per tradition, they lay out a row of candles outside. Wouldn't you know it, it's what happens in the flashback of the film and where Alma and Pedro first meet. So if this was the occasion in which their love blossomed in the first place, and they are religious, it would make sense for them to have some stronger connection to the divine because they met on this specific and particular occasion. And why not? We can just say that this particular area of Colombia is more enchanted than other places or something. When Pedro sacrifices himself for the good of his people in this area, and especially his family, we can say that it rang with particular intensity to the divine, and on the moment of his death, he made a single prayer. And that prayer was simply, "Protect my family." Not only was the prayer heard, but it manifested in real life, sort of like a wish that was granted. So all the pieces were put in place to ensure that that specific prayer was granted in full. Pedro's family, as well as the people of his village, would be fully protected in a perfect bubble, cut from the outside world, where everything they need to survive would be in there for them, such as a magic house that could move and be as sturdy and safe as needed, special rooms that could help improve and perfect these specific powers for the family members to the point that they're like almost mini TARDISes.
Is it? I noticed.
The entire surrounding area shifted, creating enormous mountains that no one could pass through, and his family members would each have special powers specifically made to ensure that their new lives would remain perfectly stable and intact. In fact, it's kind of literal if you think about it. Luisa is the tank that not only can move and lift anything, but will be the perfect warrior in case of invasions. Camilo can shapeshift and infiltrate outsiders should they find their valley. Dolores can always hear if their valley is about to have intruders or not at all. Hell, Bruno can see if they will be under threat since his visions are always negative. Isabella can ensure that there's always vegetation. Pepa can control the weather to ensure a perfectly controlled environment so that that vegetation can grow food. Julieta can use that food to always be able to heal with her cooking. And we can say that Antonio's gift could start off as talking to animals to make sure they could report on anything going on outside the valley and, who knows, one day even control the animals for food. Yeah, I know it's Disney, but still. Either way, all of this is specifically tailored to preserve life in this perfect bubble and keep all these people exactly as the prayer asked for. Protected with no further wants or needs or incentives to leave. This, however, doesn't necessarily mean that Pedro is Casita itself. We can say that his spirit sort of roams around the area or is maybe directly in the heavens, and is sort of the fuel, the battery that powers the whole magic. But no, there are too many of these elements to say that they represent a single man. It would be a bit much to make a character who was like a builder, a candle maker, and like a scientist that was studying the limits of human potential or whatever, especially in this time period. So, the best choice is to just say that they're all individual aspects of Pedro's single prayer created specifically to cater to each need of the village and family. The one single thing Pedro can actually do and influence from the beyond, whether the miracle as a whole does exist at all or not. Now, keep that in mind because we will get back to it later. For now, let's continue with the burden of gifts. The core pillar on which this whole story revolves around is the fact that there is a family with different powers except for one. Very original, Disney. They all use their gifts to do their best and help the community around them, and the community itself seems to happily rely on them for pretty much everything. And if this wasn't a Disney movie, I'm pretty sure this would have been the coolest mafia story ever. However, while at first the film does make us think that having these powers would be awesome, it slowly starts peeling away from that notion, and we find out that these gifts are actually a burden for their users. Isabella can create flowers, and because she's seen as the most beautiful girl in the village, these two combined make sure that there are high expectations for her to always be perfect, with no room for flaws. Bruno can see the future, and the visions are always accurate, except when they're not, I guess, I don't know, but can only see bad things happen, so everyone ended up hating him for life. Tia Peppa can alter the weather, but it's always dependent on her mood, so she's always forced to be happy even when she doesn't want to, lest she cause a devastating storm.
You're lucky it's not a hurricane!
Luisa is super strong, and because she's the one everyone turns to for help, it's revealed that she feels like she's always under pressure, as explained with what actually is the best song in the whole damn film. Okay, seriously guys, small tangent. I get that Bruno's song is catchy and all, but how the hell is no one praising the hell out of Surface Pressure? It's fast-paced, it's epic, it's super catchy too, has utterly stunning visuals. The lyrics have so much more depth that anyone can relate to, and is just overall better. Sure, maybe that's just my opinion, but I can't be the only one to think that, right? And yet all everyone can think about is freaking We Don't Talk About that. To the point that it's becoming tiresome and I'm slowly getting sick of it. And look, it's good, it's really good in fact, don't get me wrong. But how the hell did this not become the new Let It Go and yet this did? Ugh, whatever, back on track. Anyway, as much as we do get some insight into some of their gifts, we don't really get the full extent of everyone's gifts. And frankly, while I know that giving this much screen time to everyone would be hard, if we're shown that some of them have their lives burdened by these gifts, I think the others should have the same treatment too. For example, we have Dolores, who has super hearing and even says in the film,
"Oh, and Luisa, I heard her eye twitching all night."
Now, really think about that for a second. She could hear her own sister's eye twitching in the middle of the night. How damn sensitive are these damn ears? And most importantly, are they like this all the damn time? Because if that's the case, how has she not gone utterly insane by now? Every sound should have been amplified to the max. Buzzing insects would be like chainsaws, stepping on branches like thunder, and voices will be like full-on explosions. All of this in vast numbers 24/7. I don't even want to think what people f***ing sound like to her. The real miracle is how the hell she kept her sanity all this time, or how such fine-tuned hearing hasn't straight up made her deaf. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if her personal room would maybe be a soundproof stage or something just so she can have some peace. Oh, and speaking of her hearing, she should have been the one person who was aware of Bruno hiding in Casita's walls the whole time. Maybe pretending that she had an eating disorder to the rest of the family just so she could occasionally bring some food to Bruno in secret. And no, just saying,
"I knew he never left, I heard him every day,"
at the very end isn't enough. And if she had been this secret ally all this time, it would reinforce her wish to send Mirabel to Luisa and then possibly other family members to discover what their burdens might be as well. Burdens that Dolores would be fully aware thanks to her hyper hearing. All of this being a nudge in the right direction so that she herself doesn't risk being seen as the lone crazy one in the family. After all, if any family member doesn't live up to Abuela's high standards, any of them could be shunned out, as Dolores has witnessed with the way they don't talk.
We don't talk about.
No!
The way they don't do that. Anyway, other characters we can analyze are perhaps Camilo, who can shapeshift into anyone. He's fine with it so far, but if we're keeping this thread of burdened gifts, maybe we can say that he's so used to shapeshifting and turning into other people that at times he remains willingly stuck as other people. Why? Because, being still young, he still hasn't found an identity for himself. Just imagine what that level of shapeshifting can cause in terms of an actual identity crisis to a teenager if he has such an easy solution to just not be himself, never needing to face the consequences and responsibilities of being his own person, but on the flip side never gaining the advantages in the long run either, preferring to take the identities of whoever else he encounters at that moment. And if someone were to pin him down and try to talk straight to him, I wouldn't be surprised if he developed a full dissociative identity disorder, all caused from a lack of practice in anchoring his own identity. Then we have Julieta, Mirabel's mother. The food she cooks heals the wounds of others. It's kind of explored a little bit in the relationship with her husband, who is accident prone, and maybe the two got together due to the sheer amount of times he got injured. Which on the one hand is cute, but on the other it means that he's just dead as soon as he can't rely on her gift. But we can build upon this too by saying that perhaps, much like Luisa, she's overworked. People can grow careless in their lives because they always know that Julieta's food is readily available to fix anything, and she becomes overclocked with the sheer amount of food she has to make all the damn time. And again, like Luisa, even though there were no bad intentions from anyone in the village, she starts having doubts if she's even seen as a person or if her gift is all the identity she has. And finally, Antonio. This is a real missed opportunity because we see him without his gift at first, and he has a strong relationship with Mirabel because of it. She's super supportive of him because he feels so shy and nervous, even if she starts being left out later. When he then goes to get his gift at the ceremony, he can talk to animals, and maybe we can enhance that. I'd go as far as to propose that earlier he actually suffered from severe anxiety around people, probably caused by the fact that everyone now has higher expectations of him after Mirabel's flop, which caused him to seek refuge from the world. Mirabel is the only one he talks to because they bonded over their mundaneness within the family. In this case, the burden he'll face with his gift can end up being that, much like Dolores, he will always be hearing way too many animals talking. We're not just talking cats, dogs, and birds, but also insects and rats, as the film itself points out, day and night. And just because he knows what they're saying, it doesn't mean that he can have a conversation with them. So, he'll go from being unable to dialogue with humans to wanting to ignore animals as well, which can be severely damaging to the development of a 5-year-old. So, to recap, if we're thus shown how all these characters are suffering from the pressure of these gifts, it can help contrast even more with Abuela Alma. She is the one original family member who didn't receive a gift, and we can say that perhaps the gifts can only happen to kids because they're still developing, leaving her to be the moral guide to them without understanding that the gifts can be a burden at all. Alright, now that we established all these pieces, it's time that we address the main question everyone has been trying to theorize all this time. The one big mystery that started this whole plot, and that is Mirabel's lack of a miracle. And yes, I'm specifically saying miracle and not gift. Because as much as she wants to have one, and it's implied at the end of the film that she kinda sorta got one, I guess, it's still not exactly clear on what. Many have speculated online that she is now destined to be the new matriarch of the family after Abuela passes away. But if that's the case, why did she still not get her own personal door? Even Abuela has one, and not the entrance to all of Casita, despite not having any explicit gift. So what gives? Is it really that, well, she actually put the family together so her door is different? Yeah, sorry, but I'm not buying that. Something doesn't feel right here. And honestly, while I understand that this is an animated Disney musical trying to be a new classic, needing to fill in certain check marks such as a happy ending where everything is fine again, I think Disney completely missed the mark with this ending. Thus, I propose that, instead of restoring the magic should have remained gone. And to explain this, let's now take all the pieces we have established and reinforced with the previous points and see how they would play out in this new scenario. We so far proposed the theory that Abuelo Pedro could have been not necessarily the spirit of Casita and the magic, but that his prayer/wish to protect the family might have been just the power source of it all. And we also reinforced even more the idea that the gifts were actually a burden, caused by Abuela Alma's pressure to keep the family's status stable in this way, in honor and memory of Pedro's sacrifice. In fact, it's such a pressure that, intentionally or not, the creators of the film are tackling a real-life subject matter, and that is the psychological effect of transgenerational trauma. This is when a group of people carry with them a collective trauma that can be caused by any aspects of their cultural upbringing or identity, be it from historical tragedies, consequences of poverty, abuse, or whatever. When this happens, people who have lived through these can subconsciously embody and then transmit their trauma, be it in the form of violence, anxiety, depression, identity crisis, disassociation, or whatever, to their offsprings, which they themselves will carry in their lives to the next generation, and then the next, and then the next, with virtually no end in sight unless diluted, addressed, or treated properly somehow. This is exactly the case with this story. Abuela Alma has lived through a particular tragedy. That of her people being chased away from their homes and her beloved sacrificing himself, the result of which caused the Encanto to happen. It was specifically made by Pedro to protect everyone so they would forever be safe from the outside world and never face such a tragedy ever again. And Abuela will be damned before she lets anything happen to that miracle. However, this is where it can get interesting. If Pedro was indeed like in heaven or something looking down on everyone, he could see that while he caused a perfect setup for his family and community, from the perfect house to a perfectly secluded area to literally everyone having a gift that could help them survive in this bubble, despite his best intentions, the long-term side effects would slowly start to reveal themselves. Because, let's face it, as the global event has also taught us, being trapped or confined in bubbles or secluded areas of any sorts for too long is extremely unhealthy, especially when he can see that 50 damn years after the whole 1,000-day war in Colombia was over, it was safe to go back outside. So he could have just ended the Encanto and the family could just go back into the real world then, right? Well, no. Because he would have known that simply stripping away a certain stability people are used to can be just as unhealthy, damaging, and dangerous. And while I don't think Pedro would have been aware of the specific medical term for it, he would have implemented a technique called exposure therapy. This is a method to treat a patient where if they have a deeply seated fear of something, whatever that is, the best method is to very, very slowly expose them to small amounts of that specific fear. In a safe environment, of course, letting the patient almost get used to it over time in incremental doses, training their subconscious that it's safe after all, that the defenses can be lowered until eventually they can withstand facing that fear in full force once again. In this case, if Pedro had stripped away or turned off the entire Encanto in one go, he would have caused a mass panic for all of his people who would be ill-equipped in surviving without it. But it had to be stripped away, because otherwise they'd just keep reinforcing the secluded lifestyle that he'd see was secretly causing them harm. He'd understand that Abuela Alma doesn't have bad intentions, because she really doesn't. She does love her family, it's just that her behaviors and attitudes have been misguided and are affecting everyone. The best solution then? To slowly strip it away by planting one little seed of doubt that would then have to grow slowly in the community. And the target of this experiment was none other than little Mirabel. Taking away the possibility of her promised gift would have been that first seed, the first small exposure to change. Sure, it's, dare I say, kind of cruel to put this level of sudden pressure and trauma on an innocent little girl, but he had to start somewhere, or the longer he waited, the more difficult it would have been for his people to let it go. But it doesn't end there. The absence of Mirabel's miracle couldn't have been the first of many, otherwise Abuela Alma would have subconsciously just latched the blame onto her even more, targeting Mirabel as the sole cause of why the magic was disappearing, regardless of the reason, and simply reinforce this Pavlovian reaction that everything should stay intact. Thus, Abuelo Pedro allowed Antonio to receive his gift to both reassure Abuela Alma and also seed further confusion into Mirabel, the one Pedro hoped would sense that there was something very wrong with this entire situation and be driven to uncover its secrets and eventually dismantle this dysfunction from the inside. And the further the events of the film went on, the more Pedro, from beyond, would start to peel off more and more of his original prayer, the Encanto source, at the same time that Mirabel was discovering and unearthing the unhealthy roots the family had developed. And eventually, when the entire magic would disappear, it would happen in tangent with everyone being aware of how poisonous it had become to begin with. This is why the ending shouldn't have brought the magic back. Because it wasn't about giving our main character something that she was promised with just a delay, but because it was about discovering that the only way you can see the flaws of apparently glorious things is to be the only one who has learned to survive without them. Only then, with Miracle exposing this truth in small enough doses for everyone else to digest, could the entire family and community realize the fault on relying too much on these gifts, this magic, and this secluded bubble, and hope to return one day to society better, stronger, and for the first time truly united by being who they really are, and not what a generational trauma has told them to be. The magic should have stayed gone because sometimes even the best of intentions can become the heaviest shackles to break. And I'll be damned if that isn't the most powerful message Disney could have ever given us. But nah, happy endings, am I right? So that was Encanto, and for real guys, this was so damn close to being a possible Disney gem in my mind. I was so expecting something like this deep message to be delivered to everyone, but well, I guess I was wrong. And to be clear, this isn't to say this would have been perfect, because after all, the film is juggling an enormous cast of characters. But if nothing else, I could easily see this become maybe an animated series or something one day, where all the characters will be given their proper due. But with all of that said, as it is, I honestly still can't say that it's bad. The characters are still strong, metaphorically and literally. Even if I complain and joke about their catchiness, the songs Lin-Manuel Miranda made are still objectively good. It's obviously gorgeous to look at from the designs and animation and everything, and it's perfect grounds for storytelling discussions. Could it have ended better? Sure, but I don't think it's enough to brush off the whole thing. And who knows, maybe the morals it's trying to teach will still be delivered, and our future generations will have that little extra piece of wisdom to know when tradition is good and when it's time to grow into your own person. Anyway, that's all for today, folks. What do you think? Am I right? Am I wrong? Am I talking out of my ass? Maybe. Let me know in the comments down below. Feel free to like, share, and subscribe. Please consider subscribing to my Patreon to help support what I do here. And if there's any other franchise whose world building you'd like analyzed, let me know. Until next time, keep building worlds.